other solutions. Backed by the ownership global offices in Indonesia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Timor-Leste, Australia, Malaysia, Taiwan, USA, Myanmar. Supported point of presence and submarine cable systems around the world. Nothing could express our appreciation to all stakeholders for the recognitions given to us along this journey. These commitments of Telin in global telecommunication is nothing but to commemorate the needs of high-quality services that have touched people's lives in social relationships, cultural and economic impacts. And therefore, through this spirit, we present to you, Telin, accelerate your digital expansion in Asia Pacific. The changing environment is massive, especially in the telecommunication business, where the competition isn't just around the corner, it's across the globe. It's a little-known fact that Indonesia is the third largest market for digital adoption in the world. 50% of Indonesia's 265 million strong population are on the internet, averaging 8 hours and 51 minutes online per day. People are longing for vast, seamless, and global communications. PT Telekomunikasi Indonesia International, or TELIN, a subsidiary of PT Telekomunikasi Indonesia, TBK, or Telkom, exists to provide the communication needs of the global society, with 6 product and service portfolios that surround our business: voice, data connectivity, internet and content, mobility, enterprise service, and other solutions. Backed by the ownership global offices in Indonesia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Timor-Leste, Australia, Malaysia, Taiwan, USA, Myanmar. Supported point of presence and submarine cable systems around the world. Nothing could express our appreciation to all stakeholders for the recognitions given to us along this journey. These commitments of Telin in global telecommunication is nothing but to commemorate the needs of high-quality services that have touched people's lives in social relationships, cultural and economic impacts. And therefore, through this spirit, we present to you, Telin, accelerate your digital expansion in Asia Pacific. The changing environment is massive, especially in the telecommunication business, where the competition isn't just around the corner, it's across the globe. It's a little-known fact that Indonesia is the third largest market for digital adoption in the world. 50% of Indonesia's 265 million strong population are on the internet, averaging 8 hours and 51 minutes online per day. People are longing for vast, seamless, and global communications. PT Telekomunikasi Indonesia International, or TELIN, a subsidiary of PT Telekomunikasi Indonesia, TBK, or Telkom, exists to provide the communication needs of the global society, with 6 product and service portfolios that surround our business: voice, data connectivity, internet and content, mobility, enterprise service, and other solutions. Backed by the ownership global offices in Indonesia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Timor-Leste, Australia, Malaysia, Taiwan, USA, Myanmar. Supported point of presence and submarine cable systems around the world. Nothing could express our appreciation to all stakeholders for the recognitions given to us along this journey. These commitments of Telin in global telecommunication is nothing but to commemorate the needs of high-quality services that have touched people's lives in social relationships, cultural and economic impacts. And therefore, through this spirit, we present to you, Telin, accelerate your digital expansion in Asia Pacific. Testing.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Indonesia Pavilion at Expo 2020 Dubai. Ladies and gentlemen, our program for today is Business Talk, head by Telkom Indonesia and Telin, with the topic today is Unlocking Indonesia's Digital Potential. We are live from Expo 2020 Dubai at Indonesia Pavilion, and this business talk also live on Instagram, YouTube Telkom Indonesia, and YouTube Telin. It is the great honor for me to welcome everybody here to join us. And we are going to have great speakers to share knowledge and news, also experience and the expertise. Our great speakers today are Executive Vice President, Voice and Mobility of Telin, Mr. Nicholas Su, CEO Fox Carrier, Mr. Ehsan Ahmadi, and also its partner, Hadaara Consulting, Mr. Carl Robert. To start, we would like to welcome our moderator today. Ladies and gentlemen, big applause for Mr. Shailesh Joshi, Head of Marketplace and Business Development of Telin. Mr. Shailesh Joshi, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be back here after 2 years. And I take great honor in moderating this session with our eminent speakers. I'll shortly start introducing each one of them. Let's begin with Carl. Now, Carl has a rich professional experience of over 40 years in ICT sectors. I mean, he has spent more time in the industry than I have spent on this planet. So he has worked with various large organizations, held a lot of top and senior management positions with IBM, Verizon, and Epsilon, right? And he's a C-suite advisor to a lot of ICT companies and one of the eminent consultants in the industry today. Then next is Mr. Ehsan. He is the CEO and founder of Vox Carrier. He has over 2 decades of experience in the industry and international trade of voice, SMS, related solutions, and they started venturing into analytics, business intelligence in the recent years. It is someone who takes immense pride in trying to address any pain point and trying to convert that into a business opportunity. Welcome. Last but not least, Mr. Nicholas Su. He has a rich and diverse international experience of almost 3 decades in the industry. He is currently the Executive Vice President for Voice, Mobility and Platform Solution for Telkom Indonesia International. He's also a trusted C-suite advisor, and his specialization includes go-to-market, business development, scaling up businesses, and in the last few years, he's done a lot in terms of digital transformation approaches for various organizations, and including the digital transformation drive that we have in Telkom Indonesia. Thank you so much. So with that, shall we begin with our session? All right. So the first question today that I have is, we all know how, let's say, the wholesale industry has shaped up in the last few years. So I'll begin with you, Nick. What are the current trends that you see in the international trade for wholesale? All commodity-based wholesale.
Thank you, Shailesh. I think wholesale, voice, and mobility in general have gone through a huge changes. I think the last 15, 20 years in particular. Let's start with voice a little bit. I think voice, we all know, back in the days where everything is bilateral, it's always between operator to operator, and it's all good. Till then, when wholesale started to emerge, you suddenly find hundreds, if not more, of operators and carriers all popping up out of nowhere. So that's generally what's happening. As in all competitive environment, when more wholesalers are in town, are playing in the field, what happened then? You find competition become more intense. When competition intense, you find your margins are starting to being crunched, right? That's exactly what happened 15 years, 20 years. Fast forward to today, in the wholesale voice industry today is going through a tremendous, unfortunately in a negative way, that the margins are being crunched, revenue are dropping. And not to mention, as we grow, you find a lot more fraudulent traffic to some extent. I think we'll talk a little bit on that later on. But fraudulent traffic is definitely something that we're trying to prevent, something that we're working very hard as an industry to stop that. Now, I'll just stop a little bit on the voice side. I'll touch a little bit on the SMS side. The A2P, on the other hand, is a little bit different. A2P, we're still growing. We're still growing at I guess, it kind of tapered down a little bit on the growth side, compared to the last 10 years or more, it's been on a high growth rate. Yeah. But on particularly A2P, margins are still healthy. Now, why you may think that A2P is growing in such a fast pace, particularly driven by the OTTs, particularly driven by the enterprises, in particular what we call this A2P one-time password. So obviously we'll talk a little bit more detail on that, but one-time password have driven basically the growth of the A2P industry. Now, I may think that A2P is starting to feel the pressure of what voice actually faces last 15 years. Margins are starting to get a little bit crunch out there. So as an industry, as a colleagues here, we need to figure out what can we do moving forward. Now, I also want to share here is, we also find that the battlefield have really shifted from the pure connectivity layer to the application layer. Now, if you look at the likes of all the cloud communication companies, Twilios, et cetera, and these are companies who are no more than 15 years, I may say, 10, 15 years at most. And they have come in out of, nowhere. They're not, Telco have been there for 30, 40, 50 years, and they have garnered a growth in this particular space, and voice and SMS. They have really shifted the battlefield from connectivity to the application layer. I think that's what we're seeing today. Obviously, it's not, exhaustive, but in general, that's what we're seeing today, Shailesh.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. Ehsan, would you like to share your views on this?
Sure. As Nicholas mentioned, traditional voice P2P declining. This is obvious. All the statistics show like 10% average year-on-year decline on P2P voice. According to telegeography, at least. In some regions, maybe more. So that's obvious that as the P2P voice declining, and now we have this new phenomenon of flash A2P voice. So we see an emerge of voice to A2P, similar to what happened with SMS almost 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when SMS P2P started to decline, and then A2P SMS starting to grow. And we have, almost many MNOs today, they have a very good business on A2P SMS. So voice also starting to emerge, in the A2P space or business space. I believe carriers should start to focus on A2P now, and business services. And definitely you need platforms there. Just aggregation is not enough. You need platforms. You need the platform like CPaaS, like anti-fraud. So there is still need of investment. And it can be also, and on some extent, they outsourced partially to some technology companies or internally to be insourced. But definitely, in order to mitigate new type of fraud, also as mentioned, Nicholas, fraud also evolving, we become more complex, and you need to invest in new platform, new technologies, and that's something that carriers should think about, should start to focus on that space, new platform, new technologies, in order to meet the demand and mitigate the new type of frauds and challenges that our industry facing.
So Vox started investing into business analytics, intelligence, etc. Thank you, Ehsan. Carl, what's your view about this?
Well, I'm going to give you a more optimistic view, I think, because I think it's time for wholesale businesses to rebrand themselves, revector themselves, because for a number of years now, the connotation of wholesale is it's something cheap, something nasty, generates revenue, which we like, doesn't give us the margins we want, which is bad, and very much related to commoditized products, whether that be voice, messaging. We know that P2P versus A2P has pretty much disappeared, and basic data services. Now, in this new world, as part of the whole DNA change that carriers in general have to go through, I think the same thing applies to wholesale. And I think that as the traditional voice and messaging businesses morph into something that I'm going to call unified comms, so that's a mixture of the things Ehsan was talking about, anti-fraud, authentication in all its different guises, and how you address the unified concepts, voice in the cloud, it's messaging in the cloud, all secure. That's very different from the basic services. We're not talking about, a simple firewall. It's much more sophisticated than that. And to, what Nicholas was saying, you get to a point where as you try and facilitate the transactions in that unified comms environment, you create software platforms which become a value-added product that you can sell to other carriers. So that on the voice and messaging side. On the data side, increasingly, what other carriers seek from carrier partners is the ability to extend their own network, not just with a pipe that goes from A to B. Okay, you can get that on a portal from any carrier now for the basic commodity. You don't need people for it. However, enterprises now want end-to-end SD-WAN solutions. They want them to be secure. All of this needs to go into what I call the 2 zeros, right? Which is zero touch and zero trust environment, which I'm sure we'll talk about more later on. But this is a very different scenario to a cheap voice minute and the cheapest pipe in the world. And I think that part of this pivot for the wholesale businesses needs to be a rebrand. And in fact, a couple of carriers around the world no longer call their carrier business wholesale. They call it something else. I mean, one of them, a big European carrier, calls it strategic. The strategic partnerships business. And I think that's a much better reflection, because when you think about it, the very genesis of international carrier business, the ability to call from here to London to New York to Frankfurt, came through the carrier business, not through enterprise business. If there's anything international today, it's because of wholesale. The world has changed. The wholesale business changes as much as the carriers do. And I think we need to rebrand and think that wholesale is an indirect channel to market. It's serving other carriers, but the products that are now coming to the fore, which we've heard Nicholas and Ehsan talking about, are not commodities. These are true value-added services, and they're encroaching into the area of software, which is now driving the development of new services across all of telecoms.
Thank you so much. That's indeed quite optimistic. Thank you for sharing that perspective. Just before we began, we were chatting up about how Carl has seen the early days of telco industry. And he mentioned about how efficient the programmers were back then with having to code everything in 16 KB. Imagine that. So my next question to all panelists here is that what is it that drives operators and telcos in the age of digital transformation, and how you've seen business evolve, let's say how it was 10 years back compared to how it is today? Can we begin with you, Carl?
Yeah, sure. 10 years ago, I think we were thinking very much of taking a product view. So you had voice products, you have data products, you have a wholesale business, an enterprise business. 10 years ago, people were still trying to get their arms around what cloud really meant, the impact on the telecoms business, how integrated it would or would not become. But these are all separate items. And kind of fast forward to today, everything is combined. You can't have one without the other. So you can't think in silos anymore, which is why when you go to customers with solutions, you have to have the end-to-end view. And the end-to-end view will comprise a connectivity from anywhere to anywhere, which will have data services of various values. You'll have integrated communication services. You'll have a lot of this in a cloud environment, certainly a hybrid cloud environment. It needs to be secure. And the role of the carrier is to orchestrate all of this. So we're not adding up blocks. We have it's not a block of connectivity, a block of cloud, a block of app. These are all kind of fundamentally integrated now. And the magic that needs to go on in the background is the big evolution from where we were 10 years ago, where we had separate things. Now these all need to be integrated, because the end user experience, whether that's a consumer somewhere, with their iPhone or their Samsung or what have you, or an enterprise customer who expects the same ease of use, the same nice user interface, the immediate response and the security, that is very, very different from when we were 10 years ago. And just a kind of closing point, as internet and cloud and digital are now kind of seeping through into everywhere, you think about IoT that's really come to the fore last couple of years, you've got kind of millions, hundreds of millions, probably billions of end devices that will connect to a network. And the carrier has to ensure that it all works, that it's all safe, and none of that is vulnerable. We've come a long way, and it's got more and more complex, and there's more and more value in that. However, and here's the thing that we should never lose sight of, everybody takes what we do every day, this broadcast, using our phone, for granted. In the background, there's a huge amount of magic, and the people in this industry are responsible for that.
Thank you so much, Carl. Ehsan, you started as a traditional career and have come a long way getting into, let's say, various cutting edge solutions that you're developing today. Would you like to share your views on that?
Sure. My view always was, first, before you build the solutions for the industry, you need to understand that industry well. So maybe you need to get trying to do the stuff, regular stuff that industry and deal with the challenges that that industry has. So we started as a carrier to understand first the carrier business, and then after understanding well, starting to finding the pain points and then translating them, or finding solution to address those pain points and transform those pain points in opportunity. Actually, this is what I always saying. So so what we found in the carrier business was things that everyone knows. I mean, fraud, problem with fraud, quality, commoditizing of the industry, and then emerging in new services, business services, in order to thrive. I mean, most of the carriers, they do a little bit of here and a little bit of this and that here and there, but I would say it's not still, we are in the big and starting of the journey. A lot of things can be done. And we see, comparing with 10 years ago, the market demand change. I mean, businesses, they have different type of expectation. IoT, CPaaS, omni-channel, two-factor authentication. These are the type of solutions that businesses are demanding today. And the carriers and wholesale also is part of this ecosystem, is part of this chain. You need platforms, you need solutions to mitigate fraud, to enable different services, to control quality, to offer the best quality. And enterprises nowadays are very, very picky and demanding, are not like that type of what we used to see 10, 15 maybe years ago. And also very aggressive when it comes to procurement process and cost saving and optimizing. So the challenges of dealing with them is quite complicated. I mean, I believe telcos, carriers, everyone should invest and implement in new platform, new technologies, innovating in order to address these new demands of coming from, I mean, we see this also on the consumer part. 60% of the new consumers are young native, digital natives, which they have sophisticated demand, highly personalized type of customer, personalized type of digital approach. This is what they demand today, and they expect this also from their telco provider. This is also in the business B2B segment. And as Carl mentioned, for all of this, we need a new technology to adopt new technologies, new platforms, and to have a totally different approach than a commodity approach of taking something from right, moving left, and with almost zero value. This is, I don't think, that something that is going to, is not sustainable and is not going to thrive. We need to change the way that we are thinking, change our DNA, Mr. more digital DNA, towards digital DNA, I would say, and our culture. It's starting from the culture, ambition. These are the building blocks that we need to start to go the through of engineering type of new digital DNA in carrier space in order to thrive.
Thank you. So Nick, with your diverse experience ranging from data, voice, mobility, how do you see the change in the last 10 years?
10 years in telecom, it seems like a lifetime, really. Let's start with the voice particular world, interconnect world, right? So 10, 15 years ago, when a carrier operator comes to you and said, listen, I've got 500 interconnect, tendency you would go, wow, you must be doing something right. You're successful, you're so connected around the world, you're connected to everyone, every corner of this, of the world out there. Fast forward 10 years later, today, someone comes to you with 500 interconnect, it does not necessarily mean that you are doing better than someone with less. The Pareto rules of 80-20 always works. 80% of the traffic are always coming from your top, 20% of your operator partners. And that tells you one thing, right? Operators interconnect are actually costs to maintain. Maintaining 500 interconnect seems easy, but a whole lot of work sitting behind it. In order for magic to work, you have your billing settlement team working around the clock, sending invoices, checking invoices. If your sales team managing the accounts, imagine you have 500 interconnect, and the ratio of good account management to an account, 10, 15, depending on company, it's still a lot of people. But how much margin are we really making with the 500 interconnect? Not to mention the engineering work and connection. There's a whole bunch of work needed behind, and all these are costs that's creeping. Now, with the margin dropping, with the cost maintaining, if not increasing, now that's where the whole crunch of margin comes in. So what exactly is happening in the last 10 years is, as operators and telcos going through this transition, the point is, what do we do? What can they do to continue to evolve, to be successful, if not in the leading space, right? So, Ehsan and Carl talk about platform, talk about digitization, and that is something that it's happening, and it's happening at a very breakneck speed. Now, this is something that operators cannot deny. Operators have to grab it and run with it and go ahead and continue to grow it. Now, the question is this part of an operator's DNA? Now, I guess this is something that will open up a whole bunch of kind of worms here to be discussed here, right? Operators are operators, right? We've always started off as a traditional packet switching kind of network. But now in this today digital world is no longer the same. Things are moving so fast. Things are moving, right? The application layer, as I mentioned in the earlier part here, application layer simply means software. Now, software is driving the change of the entire industry. And this is not going to slow down. This is not a reversible trend. It's not reversible. This is going to go on. It's going to go on really fast. Now, how will an operator continue to operate in this scheme of things and to come out on top of it. Now we can talk about partnership. You have to build your platform to be prepared to face the onslaught of the enterprises and the OTTs. Now we'll talk about that. Carl mentioned about self-serve, which is, I think, in my belief here, is eminent. It's a must that with the cost increasing, with the ever demanding enterprise and OTTs, when they want something, they want things fast, they want things now, right? And with the hyper personalization from the enterprises requesting for something that is unheard of, 10, 15 years ago, today they want to communicate with you in all shapes and form of different omni-channels. They want to be able to be accessible in all channel of their choice. It's not of the telco's choice. It's not of enterprise choice. Now that have basically driven or drive the entire change of the whole telco industry right to the forefront. Being a digital telco, going into that direction, it's something that every telco, every operator will have to embrace in moving that direction.
Thank you so much, Nick. So as we know, digital transformation is there in.
I think Carl says something.
Yeah, if I could add a point, I think it's very important for carriers to, we speak a lot about know your customer, right? But this is very much a question of know yourself, because we know that carriers need to do things that carriers traditionally have never had to do. The whole world of software is, I'm not going to say alien, but it's very far from the legacy DNA in carriers. So what carriers need to do is understand what they're good at today and what the people they have on board today are good at, and not be afraid to bring partners in an integrated operational fashion. And you can bring that DNA through acquisition as well. Last year, in a couple of cases, I was advising carriers who had this DNA problem, and they said, we are just going to go find the right company and buy that in, because we know we have this task to do. We know, and this is great introspection, we know we can't do it ourselves. And these targets have the kind of people and products we need to get us that capability now. Because the big trap historically with carriers everywhere is, oh, we can do it ourselves. And that's been a big, big error, okay? So the openness to bringing in third parties through operational partnerships, meaningful ones, not just paper ones, or through acquisition, I think is a key piece of the open-mindedness that needs to come to bear. One of the things we were discussing before we went on air is, very often there's a big difference from what you read on a website and what the reality is in the back office. And I think understanding your reality, understanding where you want to go, and the components and the partners and the people you need to take you there is the first step to being successful for the long run.
Just adding to that, right? The core competencies of the operator or carrier, I think that's where we should always start from there, right? Not understanding your core competencies, it's a failure. At the end of the day, if you start going away from your core competencies, you're not going to be successful. Understanding who we are, understanding what we have, from there you layer it up. And whether it's through acquisition, whether it's through partnership, that's a different consideration, but understanding who we are, what can we do, what's our DNA, I think that's a fundamental, in my opinion.
That's absolutely true. There are, there are areas that carriers or telcos, they can implement new solution, new technologies in-house, and improving the processes, operations, predicting demands, and trying to improve the operation and customer experience. But there are areas which are, I would say, less cycling or less predictive for them, or less in their competence, and they it's naturally they should go and find partners to and use the synergy. I don't think that will be a solution, like everything in-house or everything outsource, but something in a balance between these two would be the great approach.
Yeah, there's some really good practical examples. Last year one of the candidates for the Global Carrier Awards was a Chinese mobile carrier, and they'd spent a lot of time working with a manufacturing company coming up with a Industry 4.0 solution, which they co-developed. That particular manufacturer used it first, but they're co-branding it and taking it to market together because the principles can be applied to different industries. So that kind of example of collaboration and then creating platforms that work per industry vertical, right, which then can be leveraged and sold on as an industry solution is the way forward. And there's a lot of that going on in the mobile area with private mobile networks now that started in the US, happening in Asia and in Europe as well. And I think we'll see more and more of that happening. But as Nicholas was saying, it starts do your own knitting first, right? Get that right, and then see who can help you get to those next stages and work with them in the right way.
Thank you, Kohal. Well, every operator or carrier would say that we have digital transformation in our agenda, right? But in an era when one has to innovate to differentiate their offerings in the market, business models change. So as a consultant, I'm going to him first. As a consultant, you work with many operators and carriers. So how do you see their business models changing, getting aligned with emergence of new technologies, for example?
Well, I think what's brought this to becoming a critical matter is COVID-19. Okay, businesses were trundling along, and then when COVID hit, a lot of enterprises had to, quotes unquote, go digital. So a lot of remote working, people accessing databases from different places, and everybody having to do things online, which before they didn't have to do online. Okay, so this has become a crunch for a number of carriers who had digital on their roadmap, as you rightly said, but the roadmap was like in 3 years, in 5 years, worst case, and it needed to happen in 6 and 12 months. In some cases, still hasn't happened. But what enterprises and end users everywhere need is that to happen now. And the conundrum for carriers is that to be successful digitally, right, it's not just providing cloud services, that's a piece of it. It's not about providing UCaaS, that's a piece of it. It's not about just authentication, that's a piece of it. But your whole operation needs to be digital, because if the way you manage your networks, your products, your back office isn't, first of all, from a process standpoint, as good as it can be. Secondly, when you've done that business process re-engineering to be as slick as it can, you automate it, which means you take the cost out of it, you take the error out of it, and you make it as sleek end user customer experience as possible. And it's not just a customer experience, it's an employee experience. I've interviewed executives who are saying it's horrible because we make the customer experience seamless, but in the background, we got lots of people working really hard to make it look seamless. That isn't digital. That's kind of fake digital. So the real digital is when you do it from the bottom up, which is a big re-engineering job, but it's the only way that carriers are going to be able to be agile enough, because in this new digital world, enterprises' business model, go to market, they're not going to change once every 12 months. They're going to change once every 12 weeks, maybe, depending on the situation. Wow. They turn up sites at different times of the year. If you're one customer I had years ago, Toys R Us, right? 40% of their annual turnover is in the first 3 weeks of December. They don't need to buy a huge network 12 months of the year. They need it for 3 weeks in the year. The rest of the time they need it much less. That's the same for lots of industry segments. So in order to provide that flexibility, the agility, you have to be all digital to do it right, to do it profitably, and to be able to survive into the future. And that's a journey that all carriers are on. And if you had a needle, right, nobody's at 100%. So that's the comforting thing for everybody out there. The real question is, how long does it take to get to 100%, and where are you starting from?
That's very insightful. Thank you so much. So Ehsan, can you also quote some examples and take us through this?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to add to what Carl said. So he covered almost all the corners of this.
I'm not coming to you for the next one.
Yeah, there are building blocks. I mean, digitalization or going digital, it's not something that you can fake it just to change the website, change the name of your company, and then suddenly you became digital. It's a matter of, first of all, ambition. So it's a couple of building blocks, engine, infrastructure part, the understanding the journey, front end, back end, and finally the culture, capabilities, people, mindset, and then I would say technology platforms. But without having all these building blocks, putting together and making them and building it and put them in the right way and building a really digital, as you, Carlos, I will use your digital DNA as that's not going to work. So there are, I mean, I think almost all the carriers and telcos, they started some initiatives in this area, but few of them going to be winners and thrive. And those one will be the one that address the problem correctly, properly, and considering all the building blocks of this type of transformation.
Thank you so much, Ehsan. So Nick, from a state-owned company's perspective, how do you look at this?
Well, I think for digital transformation to work, the commitment from the management, commitment, right from the very top, and all the other programs to put together to ensure that the carrying out of this whole transformation project has to be executed in a extremely closely monitored, in a serious way, right? Lack of commitment simply means it's a failure. It's simple as that, right? You may have the best plan written out, but without the right execution, it will be a failure. So the commitment has to be there. So I agree with what Ehsan shared, right? The people and always come first. In talent, in telecom, the people always come first without any reasonable doubt. So the people will always be investing in the right people, getting the right people to believe in this transformation is going to be doing good for the company. We believe why we are doing this transformation is extremely important. Not understanding the why is going to be a problem, right? If your employee doesn't understand why you're doing certain things, they will not be committed. So the why part and the whole commitment from the management is absolutely non-negotiable item for this to work really. Now, from talent perspective, I try to look at it from two areas from transformation. One is the internal part, and the other part is one of the products and services as to go external. So what Carl mentioned, the internal part is extremely important. So when we talk about transformation, we need to first look back into our own processes, into our own business. What is it that we can digitalize to ensure the self-serve, the low touch, to ensure that informations and data are available, accessible, on demand, at the press of a button, to be presented in the most presentable way so that we can make decisions fast. So we need to tackle this internal digitalization very quickly. So that brings to another point that what Carl mentioned, the internal employee treating as well, not just looking at the outward. The internal organization has to first embrace all these processes, all this digitalization before we can even tackle outside. There's no point we're pitching something that we are not practicing, if I may put it that way, right? So if you're pitching something to the whole world that, well, we are doing A, B, C, D, E, whereas we are not going through the same process, that would be, as what everyone says, is simply rebranding yourself, putting some keyword out there. That's not what we want, and that's not going to work. So what does that mean? The internal digitalization is going through and looking through all the processes that we have internally, every single one of them. How do we make this process, do we need a platform that allows different stakeholders to have access to this information on a click? Now, once we solve that, then we're looking outwards. Outwards and external, we're looking at what sort of digital, well, then back to the trend question, what sort of digital services and solutions are we going to look at in moving forward? So we talked about earlier, we talked about CPaaS, we talked about UCaaS, unified communication. So these are obviously the battlefield, as I always mention here, I will talk about, has shifted to the application layer. And this is real. That's where the margins are. That's where the enterprises are demanding. Again, the word hyper-personalization comes in. The ever fickle-minded to some extent, or should I say over-demanding, rightfully in the right way, not in a bad way, right? In a good way. That they expect telcos and service providers to give them what they need and what they want in order for them to feel loyal, in order for them to have a user experience that is good for them, that they will continue to engage and work with a particular enterprise out there. So these are the tools that CPaaS and UCaaS is all about. These are the tools that we need to get into, which we're telling we do have a products, with services called New APX, right? That's exactly a CPaaS solution that we've launched a couple of years ago, and we're doing great with that. Now, the second thing is the connectivity piece. The digital connectivity piece is a part that we felt that the industry is missing today. Why? Let's talk about transparency for a second. I think in the wholesale industry today, unfortunately, trust and transparency it's been a problem. Let's put it this way. In the last 10 odd years, trust and transparency have become a problem, particularly in the operators and the enterprises. With the advent of the wholesalers, growing in a big way, unfortunately, not all wholesalers are created equal, put it that way. They are responsible wholesalers. They are, unfortunately, not so responsible wholesalers. Now, it's where the not so responsible wholesalers that are creating or bringing the distrust into the industry. Now, what happens now is, to cite a simple example, if a Mr. Enterprise were to send 10 million SMS, a simple example, the operator may receive 8 million SMS, simple example. So where did 2 million SMS goes? Well, we'll figure out, right? I'll leave it to the expert Ehsan here to speak about that. But these are the reason why the distrust happens. So our goal is really to bring trust and transparency back into the industry, through our new traffic solution, the product, the marketplace that we created, we launched. The idea is to create a marketplace to allow the enterprise to directly communicate and work with the operator globally. Now that would, ideally, would bring back the trust for the OTTs and the operators. Ehsan?
That's true. I mean, okay, we unfortunately, as you said, unfortunately, since we started to understand how the carrier world works, there is I would say hypocrisy or something very paradoxal. I still don't get it very well business-wise. Most of the aggregators are somehow at the same time partner with MNOs, and at the same time they use gray routes and so on in order to stay competitive, and they do a lot of dodgy stuff to stay competitive in the market. And it's a pressure that coming from competition, as you mentioned, market is starting. They most of them didn't invest in the right technologies, and they just try to cut corners and find easy ways to make more margin. Definitely is not sustainable. And nowadays there is a lot of technologies that are backed by very advanced analytics that you can find this type of behavior from the carriers. So nowadays it's not that hard. Maybe 5 years, 10 years ago, it was more complicated, but today it's not that hard to realize which aggregator, which wholesaler is not ethical, is not doing dodgy stuff, dealing with and this is the good news. I mean, new technologies now can help us, and we can leverage them to find whom is the right partner to choose and which one just should be avoided in order to improve the transparency and make the telco channels something something that serving the demands, keeping them secure, and making them sustainable for different use cases to support different use cases.
Ehsan, talking about new technologies, do you think they can help us reshape the wholesale business? And if yes, how? Can you quote some examples?
I mean, one of the technologies that I personally support a lot, I mean, two are analytics and AI, machine learning, basically. So, and combination of these two even become make the things much more powerful. So nowadays, when it comes to fraud, for example, if you have the right solution, you can and right technology adopted to those solutions, because we have a lot of solutions nowadays that they say they are AI, this and that, but again, as Carl said, they are just painted. There is no AI there, or there is no machine learning or something. It's just some people in the background staying and doing stuff manually in some extent. And then on the PowerPoint, it's easy to write and to put. But if the technology is leveraged correctly, I think today we have very good chances to solve many of problems that we used to have or we still have, and to bring the trust, as you mentioned, to these operator channels, which I think they are here to stay. I mean, we have a lot of alternatives around, but operator native channels like SMS and voice, they are today the only ones that you can reach to anybody, anywhere into almost 10 billion subscribers in the world. So for some use cases like two-factor authentication, one-time password, which is crucial today for security of different services in enterprises, I believe SMS and voice will stay, and we just need to make sure that they are secure and not some non-ethical players do not harm this ecosystem and these channels to be adopted more and more.
I think security is one area of huge opportunity for carriers, because one thing we haven't discussed yet, I don't know if we'll get there in the time that's left, is that there's a lot of competition out there called the hyperscalers, who are investing a lot in connectivity. They're investing a lot in portals. So if you want a connection to a data center somewhere, you've got lots of options. They don't necessarily come through a carrier. Some do, but a lot don't. However, the carrier is in the unique position of being able, from a security position, so what Ehsan's saying, absolutely true. So from a comm standpoint, so voice and messaging, carrier is uniquely positioned. When you think about in the data services environment, where you can do with blockchain and get to a zero trust environment, the carrier is the only ones going to have that full end-to-end view of that. And that is a huge value add for enterprises, because the beauty of what's happened in our industry is that everything connects to everything, and everybody wants that. Enterprises want that, consumers want that, but they want it to be safe as well. And the only people who can do that are the people who have the end-to-end view, and the end-to-end view comes from carriers. So that's a huge opportunity. It's a trump card to be played and should not be underestimated, because increasingly enterprise customers are putting their core applications, financial transactions, fintech companies are over there. When you're talking about billions of dollars going over networks and through apps, you want to make sure that's safe. When you're buying something on the internet, you don't want somebody to use your credit card information. And when something's being authenticated, you want to make sure that you're not authenticating something that comes off your card and pays for somebody else's goods. So it's a huge, huge opportunity, and one that really needs to be driven home hard, I think.
Thank you so much, Carl. That was quite insightful and optimistic, as always. Nick, talking about this specific area, let's say new technologies, like Carl mentioned about blockchain, for example. How do you think such new technologies could help the new business models getting involved in the telco space?
Okay, so let's look at talent, journey through the last 10 over years now. Obviously, we started as a traditional operator carrier, so things are all bilateral, as we all imagine. One operator dealing with the other. There wasn't any trust issue. What I send, I pay. What you send, you net off and you pay. As simple as that. Things evolve over the last 10 over years. What model, basically you're asking here, is, are we adopting? Yeah, the question is, how we are adopting in the digital age today? So one, back to the key point we talk about is transparency and trust. So we are a firm believer of bringing trust and transparency back into the business. So a year ago, we launched NeoTraffic. NeoTraffic is a digital connectivity platform, marketplace, if you may. The whole objective of NeoTraffic is to bridge operators and enterprises, OTTs and wholesalers, the ethical one, obviously, with each other, and in a full transparent manner, right? So we're not adding or hiding anywhere between the marketplace. So basically the buyer can deal directly and work with the seller. They can communicate with them directly. They can negotiate with them directly, and they can interconnect through our platform itself. So we are basically enabling or bringing trust back into the whole wholesale business that we so much needed today, right? Carl and Ehsan mentioned here that the enterprises and OTTs are ever demanding, right? They want to know who are they buying from. They want to know when they send something, it ends up in the right place and not somewhere else. So by providing this platform, which we believe will bring back the trust, will allow the operator to feel safe and knowing that whoever they sell to, they will actually receive all their traffic. And for the enterprise OTTs, they will feel, they know exactly who they're buying from. They know how it's being routed. They know exactly what is being accounted for. Now, Carl mentioned something very interesting here. The operator will always be the last person standing when it comes down to trust issue, being the blockchain or blockchain-like type of solution, which obviously we believe, and we are certainly moving into that direction as well, to really bring back, adding that on top of our NeoTraffic platform. Now, think of it, NeoTraffic platform is a software-defined platform out there. We continue to, add on solutions and applications to strengthen or to improve what the platform can offer to our clients, which is the enterprises, OTTs, and fellow operators on the other side. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nick. So given this background, we know how things are shaping up. Ehsan, question will begin with you. What's there in the future? How do we unleash the future? You did the flash call monetization solution, were the first one probably in the industry to come out with that. What's next?
Almost according to studies, almost 80%, 70% of prediction are wrong about future nowadays. So I don't want to fall in that trap of trying to predict.
Except here.
So things evolve very fast, and it's very hard to see the future. But at least you can see like next year, next 2 years, something like that. But when you talk about future, long term, things move very fast. But I think companies, carriers, telcos, like any other also businesses, they should build an environment in order to get to adapt to whatever quickly and fast, to be agile, to adapt with the new environment. So instead of trying to predict what will be 10 years in the future, we at least I personally believe we should build something inside of our organization, change the DNA in a way to can adapt to whatever it will be. So when it comes to flash monetization, as you mentioned, we just realized this phenomena almost 2 years ago, and we immediately start to implement build a solution around, because we managed to predict, okay, what's going to be the challenges. It should be monetized, it should be controlled somehow, otherwise going to. And then after almost 1.5 years, analysts start to write about that and so on. So I think we need to start to understand what's happening and to adapt very fast. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, if you had asked me about, okay, what's going to be 5-6 years and you're going to be flash around and we're going to see flash around, nobody could predict 6-7 years ago, maybe 10 years ago about flash, you know. So I think at least from my end, future is for the companies that they manage to innovate, they manage to adapt fast to whatever is coming, and whatever is coming, it's very hard to predict whatever is coming. Definitely will be digital. Definitely we're not going back to cave. So we will be definitely something in a digital space, and digital transformation definitely will be should be part of the any company ambition, and innovate and getting it and adapt with the new environment. But predicting exactly what will be next, I personally prefer to don't predict something that the error margin is 70%.
Appreciate that. Nick, over to you.
I'm no Nostradamus either, so I'm not going to predict any future here. But we do believe, with the current trend that we're observing today, and keeping our ears on the ground and looking at the industry, how it's shaping and evolving, we do have a general direction, at least where we will be going in the next number of years. So we see cloud communication is something that will continue to develop further. We see software will continue to change the whole landscape of the telecom industry in all aspects, application layer down to connectivity layer, and whole vertical. The software will play more and more part in this sphere. Software, why? Because it's all driven by hyper-personalization. This is the only way software will be able to hyper-personalize for what their customers really want. So keeping that couple of things in view, we believe that is a general direction we're going. And I do agree with Ehsan here. It's very difficult to take a step and say this is exactly what will happen in the next 5 years. I think that's almost impossible for anyone to say that. Things are evolving so fast, right? 5 years seems eternal. In the telecom world, things are just evolving so fast. But generally, looking at the direction, looking at the trend, looking at what's out there, we do have a general idea. This is where we're going, and we do have our own objective set internally that we are going that way, and we are investing heavily accordingly to achieve that goal.
Thank you so much, Nick. Carl, your advice to operators, carriers, and platform players as well?
Well, a number of years ago, somebody said to me, I can't remember who, unfortunately, future of connectivity is software. And I think that rings true more than ever now. We've spoken a lot about digital. The world will be more and more digital. It's the only way that we will be able to turn up new services as dynamically and in on-demand fashion as end users, whoever they are, will want them to be. This needs to be secure. Now, one of the things I would counsel is that quite often we can talk in abstract terms about services here, there. The one piece that should be driving all of this when we redesign the carrier's processes, the systems, the products, is what is the customer journey, and how can we make that as frictionless and as enjoyable as possible? Because at the end of the day, that's going to be what differentiates you from your competition. As I said earlier, with that famous dial, everybody's on this same journey. We're all in a different place. But at the end of the day, what's going to make a difference is what your customer feels he or she or it is getting for the money they pay, how much they trust it, how much they think there's value for money, and how easy it is to use. And if you tick all of those three boxes and you're flexible enough to develop the services that are required and really turn it on a dime going into the future, then you should have a rosy future. If you think you can keep doing what you're doing today and get away with it, you're hopelessly wrong, hopelessly wrong. And you know, anybody who thinks that they've got all the answers today, it's already too late for them.
Wow, that's a nice way to finish it off, I think. Well, thank you so much, panelists. I mean, it was really insightful talking about cultural aspects of digital transformation or integrated offerings or hyper-personalization. I believe that our audience would have definitely had a lot of insights today coming in from eminent panelists. In the interest of time, I think I'll skip the last question because we hardly have a few seconds left. Thank you so much. It was really an honor.
Pleasure.
To moderate this.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Joshi, our moderator today, and also our great speakers today. Such delighted and such full knowledge we received today. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, big applause for our moderators and our guest speakers today. For your information, we are live from Expo 2020 Dubai at Indonesia Pavilion. And this business talk presented by Telkom Indonesia and Telin in collaboration with Ministry State-owned enterprise. And at 16:30 Dubai time or at 19:30 Indonesia time, we will have business talk held by Telkom Indonesia and Mitratel with topic introducing MTEL, the largest digital infrastructure company in Indonesia. This is the end of business talk. Thank you for the audience that have participated actively. Thank you once again for all honorable speakers, moderators, and all distinguished guests. On behalf of Telkom Indonesia and Telin, we would like to thank you for your participation. For more details about Indonesia Pavilion at Expo 2020 Dubai, please check our website expo2020indonesia.id and Telkom Indonesia Instagram at Telkom Indonesia. My name is Ira Menicini. Thank you very much. Keep following the COVID-19 protocol. Stay safe, stay healthy, and catch me later. Goodbye for now. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much.
The changing environment is massive, especially in the telecommunication business, where the competition isn't just around the corner, it's across the globe. It's a little known fact that Indonesia is the third largest market for digital adoption in the world. 50% of Indonesia's 265 million strong population are on the internet, averaging 8 hours and 51 minutes online per day. People are longing for vast, seamless, and global communications. PT Telekomunikasi Indonesia International, or TELIN, a subsidiary of PT Telekomunikasi Indonesia, TBK, or Telkom, exists to provide the communication needs of the global society. With 6 product and service portfolios that surround our business: voice, data connectivity, internet and content, mobility, enterprise service, and other solutions. Backed by the ownership global offices in Indonesia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Timor-Leste, Australia, Malaysia, Taiwan, USA, Myanmar. Supported point of presence as submarine cable systems around the world. Nothing could express our appreciation to all stakeholders for the recognitions given to us along this journey. These commitments of Talim in global telecommunication is nothing but to commemorate the needs of high-quality services that have touched people's lives in social relationships, cultural, and economic impacts. And therefore, through this spirit, we present to you Talim. Accelerate your digital expansion in Asia Pacific. The changing environment is massive, especially in the telecommunication business, where the competition isn't just around the corner, it's across the globe. It's a little known fact that Indonesia is the third largest market for digital adoption in the world.